Hey world, it's Patrick Lovell coming with another truth bomb, and I think I thought a very helpful thing kind of maneuvered in my mind last night that I think will hopefully gestate in your mind because of just I think the straightforwardness of it. So last night I tuned in to Game of Thrones: House of the Dragon. I was really looking forward to it because I became a huge fan of Game of Thrones, and it's ironic because I literally pushed against it, or at least diving into it for like many seasons. I didn't follow the hype, or I didn't buy the hype, and it took me until about season 5 to jump in. And when I did, suddenly I became transfixed, and I ended up watching Game of Thrones like at least 5 times before the conclusion of the final episode, and I've probably seen it a couple of times since. And when you get to know a story and the characters and all of the things that are imbued in that incredible execution, you have a specific come from, right? And when I watched Game of Thrones: House of the Dragons last night, it was a trip, and I ended up having to watch it twice because, truth be told, I actually loved it. But I was watching it from a standpoint that, it was King's Landing. It all felt very familiar, particularly as most of us know what happened at the end of Game of Thrones to King's Landing. But there was also this added element where there was this huge like auditorium slash, I don't know, it was almost like a giant, arena for dragons. And all of this stuff took place like 172 years before the birth of Daenerys Targaryen. So you're kind of like haggling with all of that in your mind and all of the other kind of intricacies of that. The one thing that was coming to my mind the whole time is that unbelievable um, revelation by David Byrne that same as it ever was. I thought that was kind of playing out in Game of Thrones last night, that all of this history happens and yet it just repeats itself, which is like what we're in the midst of. But the relevance to what I'm talking about with all the background noise, I have no idea why helicopters and trucks and everybody else are coming at me while I'm recording this. I'm almost keeping this on just in case, like, the black ops of the CIA come down and rain bullets on me while you're all watching because, this information I have is fucking giant. And it's kind of surprising to me that hasn't already happened. But the long and the short of it is that the relevancy of what I'm telling to you in terms of how I had to reconfigure my brain was the story that took me 13 years to figure out, that I did have to do all the mental gymnastics to wrap my head around what was actually real to try to bring these truth bombs to you and what they're all about. And the utter lunacy of this is, I think, this sort of parallel, right? So we all look at judges, we look at cops, we look at politicians, we look at leaders, we look at people that are extremely successful in our country, and we just assume most of the time, and most of us assume that they're legitimate, that whatever they did to get to that position was worthy of them being in the position. And that's the whole point of democracy. You literally have to have faith in your elected leaders and those that they appoint to specific positions, that they're going to be actually doing so on behalf of a government of, by, and for the people. That's the trade off. And then ultimately, you have the scenario where our currency really is the same thing. Why do you think we say the full faith and credit of the United States? You have to have faith in the institutions of power that they're acting in the manner that they're designed to do. But unfortunately, what we've discovered, what I discovered, and what I continue to truth bomb on you is that it's just the opposite. In fact, Donald Trump is being, like, I don't know, castigated as a threat to democracy. Well, he would be if democracy already hadn't been destroyed 13 years ago, at least. He's being, castigated again in certain media that he's a threat to the integrity of law. Again, he's not, because A, he should have been in prison probably decades ago, because the guy's been up to his eyeballs in all sorts of criminal grift forever. And but beyond that, he's literally a mid-level player compared to the giants that are above the law. So anyone who says that, anything other than that, that should be the first red flag to you, to be like, they're full of shit. But it's even worse than that. So I for example, had been to Manhattan, New York City. I can't even tell you how many times over my lifetime. But I've always, respected and just have been inspired by the energy of that city. I love New York. I love Manhattan. I love the Big Apple. But I know all too well exactly what's happened and why I continue to bring you these truth bombs. So, like, when you're in Manhattan, there's this vibrancy, there's this dynamism, there's this incredible energy, this power, this like anything can happen, this can do spirit. And most of that is undergirded by capitalism. And really, the truth of capitalism, or I should say, just the ideal of capitalism, is it's just money makes money. Okay? Really, what a concept for somebody trying to build a vertical, like I've talked about before, of some sort of great, approach to technology or healthcare or whatever the case is, that you have to fund because you got to go vertical and you got to take it to market. And so capitalism enables that to happen. That people invest in things because they want to make money on their money. Certainly makes a lot of sense to me, always has. But here's the rub. What happens if the whole thing is built on deception? And what happens if the whole thing is built on a criminal rot to where the guys that are actually incubators of managing that capitalism are themselves destroying everything in their path so that they can get short-term upside and then destroy everything and then buy everything up on the cheap? Well, yeah, that's a part of capitalism too. In fact, if you look back at history and you go into particularly the, let's call it mid-century, like 1700s, before that, empire and the whole notion of smash and grab. I mean, that's what the British Empire had been doing since the very beginning. That's, in fact, what the United States rebelled against to become the United States, of by and for the people. Separation of powers with liberty and justice for all. And yet it's taken us 246 years to try to become, in order to more perfect union. And what we're faced with going into the midterms is that we have the new robber barons versus the new Confederacy. So going back to the beginning, just like David Byrne always said, same as it ever was. It's not funny. It's really fucked up. What I'm trying to get inside the millions of your minds is to understand what actually happened. That you don't have a democracy, that the law is not equal. And by the way, supply and demand and capitalism doesn't exist either. For all of you people who hate socialism, this is a fucking form of socialism for the rich. I call it corporate fascism undergirded by a criminal syndicate. It's just the opposite of upward mobility. It's just the opposite of opportunity. And why? Because it's a criminal fucking racket. It's not rocket science, it's racketeering. And so Federal Reserve Act 13.3 created this emergency lender of last resort from the Fed when the entire system blew up back in 2008 that led to a $29 trillion, more like 30 trillion to be quite honest with you, pump into the financial system to save the racket. It was the full faith and credit of the United States backstopping a massive criminal racket. Wow. It's not genius, it's audacity. But what they depend on is your stupidity. I don't think you're all stupid. I don't think you're all fucking chumps. I know I wasn't a chump. They thought I was a chump. And I went on this monumental journey to go find out the truth because I'm not a chump. Because they were pissing on my head, telling me what's rain. They must have thought I was some kind of new fool. You know what I say to that? Fuck you, motherfuckers. So here I am, this many years later, and I'm trying to create a massive tidal wave civil rights movement to purge corruption. We need to elevate the truth that I'm laying on you above everything, above the noise of deception, above the noise of confusion and distortion and everything else. And so all these, asshats in media, they're fucking asshats, all of them. They just chase the cycle. And even guys that are like people that are, really on the good side of things, good natured. They want, people to live healthy lives that are, based on the rule of law and have opportunity. Yeah, they kind of want that, but they don't know what the fuck it is that I'm telling you. And they're so sequestered, cloistered in their, velvet lounges, their velvet towers. They have no idea what I'm talking about. And these are the people that get paid millions of dollars to give you the truth every night. But it's not truth, it's entertainment. I think that's well established. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to rise above. We have to get out of our silos. So, for example, if your beef is with systemic racism in prisons and all those types of things that undergird what became Black Lives Matter, you got to understand it's corruption that creates that. What if you want a new world with incredible, renewable energy infrastructure and a grid that we could all live a sustainable life where we don't have to live poison air to see, incredible tyrannical regimes like Saudi Arabia get away with things like 9/11 to basically pollute the world, light it on fire, and we sit on our hands and do nothing. If you're one of those people that know that there's a better way, we got to understand corruption because that's what's preventing it. Healthcare, agriculture, defense, wars, endless, all of those things are all predicated on corruption. And so I'm trying to ferment and foment a movement of everybody who's not a white supremacist Confederate that wants to follow the Cheeto in chief, who's a complete bumbling fool retard, off the cliff. There's got to be more people in this country that care about liberty and justice for all than do want to create a Confederate Revolution. There's got to be. But you're just sitting on your hands waiting for somebody else to do something. You're just sitting in your silos thinking that that's the way the world works, that you're like in your four walls of your universe and that's all you know or will ever know. And so who is this guy coming to me, truth bombing me, trying to get my attention, trying to wake me up, trying to move you to actually become a citizen that you inherited? You were bestowed all these powers by people who sacrificed, that laid down their lives, that went the distance to make sure that you would do the right thing. But most of us are just like, who's going to fucking save us? What's going on? What's the real story here? I'm telling you, it comes down and intersects to one fucking thing that undergirds the entire system. Federal Reserve Act 13.3 that pumped trillions upon trillions of dollars, $50 trillion, quite frankly, since 2009. Now, there's a way to parse that, and there's different variations. I'm just kind of throwing that figure out based on a whole lot of other things. It's not all from 13.3. 13.3 is at least 40 trillion of it, I can tell you that. So anybody who wants to kind of get into the nuances and the specifics and the granular details, let's talk about 2019. I'm okay with that because nobody really understands what took place. I know it was to backstop derivatives, but one of these days we'll see. But it's hard to see when you're not looking and when the system itself is so rotted for corruption that they can't put investigations together to find out who did what, when, and how, and what it means. That's who I am. That's what I've spent 13 years doing, and it's gotta come together now. It has to, because if it doesn't happen now, it's never going to happen. We're creating a full people's movement, a civil rights-like movement to purge corruption. We've got to land on the National Mall and protest in front of the Federal Reserve on 11/2/2022. Spread the word. Study everything that I put out there. Go check out www.thecon.tv. Put hold on whatever fucking porn you're watching or some Jesus savior or some fucking asswipe that's telling you shit like, what's his name? Alex fucking Jones has for the last 10 years that he made $50 million a year doing. I mean, right there, if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about how upside down, perverted, inverted everything has become. And by the way, that's where I'll finish with this. We have the rule of the elite, which isn't the elite. They're criminals that stole and hijacked everything, and it's ruled by the minority. And then they get to pay all of these offshoots to create problems and keep everybody in silos. Will you let the fog lift? Will you let the sunshine in? Will you become just emboldened by the lightning bolt of truth? Will you stand with us arm in arm, millions of you to come together and go surround the Federal Reserve and chant con? That's what the fuck happened. We've got to come together and we've got to do this. 11/2/2022. Hashtag failure is not an option. Hashtag truth is marching. Hashtag it's not rocket science, it's racketeering. Hashtag the con. Onwards and upwards.